Seneca, this is lesson, I believe, 14 in the Best of the West. Seneca, as we mentioned in the intro to this section, was a tutor of a Roman emperor named Nero, who was really not a great guy, but that wasn't Seneca's fault. Seneca was extremely influential on the American founding fathers. They loved him, guys like Jefferson, Washington, Adams, Hamilton. They all read and loved Seneca. So he was very influential on later life in the West. Let's jump right in. He talks about the Odyssey in a way I thought was quite interesting. He says, "We ourselves encounter storms of the spirit which toss us daily, and our nature drives us into all the ills which troubled Odysseus. For beauty never ceases to tempt our eyes, or the enemy to assail us. On this side, savage monsters delight in human blood. On that side, treacheries allure the ear. Yonder looms shipwreck and varied misfortunes. The example of Odysseus shows me how I should love my country, my wife, my father, and how, after setbacks, I should keep on course toward honorable ends." So this expresses very much the idea that Cicero expressed in Praise of Literature in the Archias, the idea of literature as moral model building and examples for us to all use in living our lives. In the same way, he praises Socrates, Seneca does, for offering good examples. And he says, "Spend your time with Socrates. If you need a model, take him, a patient old man. Plato and Aristotle derived more benefit from the character of Socrates than from his words. In other words, from the example of how he lived his life rather than what he said or taught." Okay, let's talk about his view of the crowds. He doesn't like crowds. He doesn't like mobs. He doesn't like the collective. But in the end, he says, you kind of got to be in the world. You kind of got to live in the world. So I'm just going to read you the key passages there, which I underlined and which I think you should take note of, because this becomes an important idea in a lot of ways in the West, in the Stoic philosophy, in people like Ralph Waldo Emerson, his idea of self-reliance, in people like Henry David Thoreau, who retreated to nature, says, "Do you ask me what you should especially avoid? I say crowds. To consort with the crowd harms us. The greater the mob in which we mingle, the greater the danger. I come home more greedy, more ambitious, more voluptuous, and even more cruel and inhuman because I have gone among the human mass. From the mob, we must above all rescue the young who, learning at first by imitation, find it too easy to side with the majority. Withdraw into yourself as far as you can. Associate with those who will make you a better person. When forced into a crowd, withdraw into yourself. Do not try to please the crowd. What you think of yourself matters much more than what others think of you." Then he kind of reverses himself, Seneca does, and he says, well, okay, maybe you can't always avoid a crowd, and you can't avoid, if you're going to be a man of action or public service, dealing with the mob. But he says it shows even greater self-control to refuse to withdraw and to do what the crowd does, but in a different way, thus neither making oneself conspicuous nor becoming one of the crowd. So he says then the next paragraph, "Set a higher standard of life than that of the multitude, but not a contrary standard. Otherwise, we shall frighten away and repel the persons whom we wish to improve." Now, so what I see him saying there is, look, if you go and live on a mountaintop because society is so corrupt, then society will never improve. If all the good people dropped out, like in the Ayn Rand novel Atlas Shrugged, where all the smart people and the productive people just decide to drop out of society and let the mob kind of rule itself until it destroys itself, and then they're going to come back. You know, if you did that, you're really not participating in your society. And so I see Seneca as saying, be in the world, but not of the world, which is actually a Christian idea that we'll come upon next week. Okay, so let's talk about Seneca on anger. Here we see again a device which I would like to call the Roman catalog, where Roman prose stylists like Seneca or Ovid or Virgil, as we recall from the last couple sessions, tend to just pile up examples, and I think they use it to good effect. He says, Seneca, Sure signs of raving madness, a bold and threatening look, a gloomy brow, a grim mouth, rapid steps, restless hands, change of color, heavy sighs. Eyes ablaze and glittering, the face flushed as blood boils up, quivering lips, teeth pressed together, bristling hair, hissing breath, writhing limbs, groans and bellowing, speech broken off with words barely uttered, feet stamping. Thus, godlike man degrades himself into a demon. Again, the idea that man is either the best, most godlike creature or the worst thing on earth, which we started seeing in Aristotle and coming up again since then. Then we get here the idea that man has anger because he has forethought, and that man has anger because he has reason. And Seneca cites Aristotle, who says anger is a burning desire to repay or pay back pain. Anger, in that sense, seems unique to man. Wild animals seem capable of violence, but not of the desire to avenge a definite offense. For no creature but man has prudence, forethought, choice. Anger seems truly the enemy of reason, yet it cannot exist without a certain perverted reason. In other words, only animals that have reason could feel angry. Does that make sense to you guys? You kind of have to, right? So a dog might be vicious, but a dog doesn't sit around going, oh, I'm going to get back this other dog because he bit me 3 years ago, as far as we can tell. And no animals kind of think like that. So it takes a certain amount of intelligence to be angry. And this is why anger is so difficult and so human and so common and causes millions and millions of deaths, because it gets attached to reason like a parasite and kind of perverts reason and makes it do the wrong thing. Reason will listen to anger, but anger will not listen to reason. The next, he goes on, anger disagrees with nature. Nature tells us to help, anger tells us to harm. The one would save a stranger, the other would ruin even those dearest. The excellent man will sacrifice himself to help someone, but the angry man will sacrifice himself just to hurt someone. He talks about anger as voluntary, which it's because it kind of feels like it's not voluntary, but he says anger proceeds with a certain perverted permission of the mind. Only a mental choice can join two propositions: that something has unduly damaged us and that we should retaliate. The process involves realization, indignation, condemnation, and finally retribution. These cannot occur without the mind's assent. So what Seneca is saying here is try to get control of your mind and your thoughts before they lead you down a path in which you can hurt others or even hurt yourself because of your desire to avenge. And Homer in the Iliad, he says, anger is sweeter than honey. What is the Iliad about? The first sentence tells us it's about the anger of Achilles. Sing, O goddess of the wrath or anger of Achilles. So in a way, the Western tradition begins with an epic poem about anger and its destructive consequences. And so it's entirely within that tradition that Seneca takes up anger from a philosophical point of view, where Homer has taken it up from a poet's point of view. Now, another point I would like to ask you guys about is where he says, is it unfair that something happened to you, or is it just unexpected? And that's one that always sticks with me, because a lot of times I feel that something's unfair, but really it just kind of surprised me and I wasn't ready for it. Seneca is one of the many people who thought that Socrates showed ideal character by not being angry when he was sentenced to death unfairly, and when he had to drink the hemlock. He never allowed that to get the better of him and make him seem less than godlike. Because Socrates expected it, I think he was able to avoid anger. And I think the interesting thing there is that it was unfair what happened to Socrates, surely. But because Socrates prepared his mind for everything like a philosopher, and the idea that Socrates even said philosophy is a preparation for death, a preparation for how you go to your death, knowing how you've lived your life, and wanting to live even the moment of your death in the same tone, the heroic tone, as the rest of your life, that I think Seneca would say, yeah, you're right, it's unfair, but look what Socrates made of it. A great example for the rest of us, which we're still talking about 2,500 years later. Friendship. He says, let's exchange anger for friendship. Another Aristotelian idea, the idea of friendship. And let's look at that passage more closely, because it actually stirs up what is a Christian idea. And it's funny because Seneca lived and died just about the time that Christianity was coming into being. The first generation of Christians, right after Christ, were operating in Rome at the time Seneca was alive. And this idea, the Christian idea that you should turn your other cheek to the person who hurts you, it shows that this was in the water even among non-Christians. Suppose, however, that anger smolders on both sides and it comes to a clash. The better man steps back first and the winner loses. In other words, if you win from being angry, you actually really lose. It's this kind of thing of really pacifism and nonviolence. If someone is picking a fight with you, kind of walk away. Don't get roped in by someone else's anger. And I think in general, that's good advice. So let's talk about some of the techniques that Seneca proposes for controlling your anger. Only one thing can calm us. We must agree to go easy on each other. And if someone has done something wrong to you and it's a first offense, he says, recall this person has pleased you until now. If he's a repeat offender, bear now what you bore before. If a friend offends you, oh, he didn't mean it. If an enemy, he did what enemies do. So again, don't judge other people so quickly. You should judge them, but judge them within a spirit of charity, giving them the benefit of the doubt. He says, why should we hate wrongdoers? Error has driven them to their misdeeds. We should hate the sin, not the sinner. Otherwise, we must hate ourselves. For how often has each of us erred and required forgiveness? And then he continues that error is universal. So we should basically forgive the whole human race because to err is human, as the expression goes. Now, let's talk about this idea that you should also examine your conscience daily, because this is a very important idea. It was one of the 10 core tenets of Western civilization: self-criticism, moral audits, and commands of conscience. So look what's in your soul. Socrates, recall, said the unexamined life is not worth living. So Seneca is saying, make a daily routine of examining your life and saying, well, what did I do today? How was I angry with someone? How was I short or cruel? Or what did I do that I could do better? And he says, if we do this, it will help us improve. Another thing is, like, when I'm trying to lose weight, I go to like a nutritionist. She says, what you have to do is write down everything you eat, because otherwise you won't really realize what you're doing. And if you hold yourself accountable and you're like, well, yeah, I did eat like a whole half bag of nachos, whatever, you're like, wow. And if you don't write it down, you might just be able to put it out of mind and kind of trick yourself and say, oh yeah, I'm eating responsibly, but for some reason I just keep gaining weight. So if you keep track, it does help you improve yourself if you are interested in improving yourself. So last idea that I would just leave you with in Seneca is this idea that death kind of makes anger ridiculous. He says, Seneca says, why such commotion, such turbulent confusion of life? Fate looms above our heads, chalking up our wasted days. What of the man who barks at you? A low and despicable person, of course, but a sharp-tongued nuisance to you. Why the all-out effort to crush him? Why the anger with your slave, your master, your king, your dependent? Wait a little. Death comes to make you all equal. Why the bother with struggles and snares? Surely you cannot wish the object of your anger to suffer anything more than death. Even if you stay quiet, he will die. You waste your effort if you want to cause what will happen anyway. In the meantime, while we still draw breath, while we still remain among human beings, let us cultivate our humanity. So he's saying, while you can, while it's in your power, be good, be calm, and don't let the little things get to you that are going to cause you to consume your life with this absurd quest to kill or hurt something that's going to die anyway. And who I think of there as the opposite of that is Captain Ahab from Moby Dick, who devotes his whole life to trying to kill the whale that took his leg. And he ruins his own life and the lives of everyone on his ship in his insane quest to kill this whale. But it's this idea of the madness which can come over us when we let anger rule our lives. I think the larger point is this idea of anger as feminine and childish. The ancients, and even up until modern times, and frankly, many people today, characterize women as being emotional. Women are being emotional, and men are kind of more restrained. But I think the idea is that women have weak characters because they're ruled by their emotions, and the masculine character is defined by suppressing its emotions and not being ruled by emotion. And clearly, this is a generalization and a characterization of women, which was used in many ways to keep them down, to keep them from having equal rights. The idea, oh, a woman couldn't be president; she'd be too emotional. She'd get all upset, and then she'd press the nuclear button and blow up the whole world. So, if you notice, there still hasn't been a woman president, although women have led nations like Great Britain and Germany, and there certainly have been queens throughout history who have shown, in fact, better judgment than most kings. So, take, for instance, in England, their two greatest rulers by far were Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria, the original Queen Elizabeth from Shakespeare's time, and Queen Victoria from the 19th century. Those two women built England into the greatest power before the United States came on the scene, and we are part of them. And on that note, I'd say we're good for tonight. One more day of philosophy, and then of Roman philosophy, and then we take a nice break for the weekend, and then we get into Christianity next week. So we definitely turn the page on what's called classical antiquity.